When the arrows fell, I did not move. When death stood before me, I did not blink. That is Fudoshin, the unmoving mind, the heart that stays still when the world trembles. A samurai is not fearless. He simply does not serve fear. Through endless training, through silence and repetition, his thoughts stop running, and his presence becomes unshakable. In chaos, he breathes. In danger, he sees clearly. In stillness, he becomes unstoppable. This is not meditation. It's mastery. The art of standing firm when everything falls apart. Learn what the warriors of old knew, how to hold your ground inside and out. This is the Fudoshin mindset. Subscribe and remember the way of the unmoving heart. The warrior who does not move. There was a time when I too trembled. Before the sound of steel meeting steel, before the rush of the first strike, my heart would race. The body obeyed, but the mind was wild, chasing fear, memory, and the thought of death. It took years to understand that a warrior does not master others until he masters stillness. Fudoshin, the immovable heart. It is not a state you reach once and keep forever. It is a discipline, a rhythm, a fire that must be tended every day. It means remaining composed when the body screams to react, when the mind wants to run, and when life tests every fiber of your being. To be unmoving is not to be frozen, it is to be anchored. The wind may bend the branches, but the roots remain. That is the mind of Fudoshin. In the dojo, I learned that stillness begins with awareness. Before I could calm my sword, I had to calm my breath. Before I could face my opponent, I had to face myself. Every hesitation, every flash of anger, every distraction, they were not enemies outside me. They were battles inside me. The masters used to say, if your mind moves, your sword follows. That is why a single thought of doubt can cost your life. The mind must become like a clear lake, not empty, but undisturbed. When the surface is calm, it reflects everything. When it is turbulent, it reflects nothing. Through repetition, I trained not just the body, but the moment. Thousands of strikes, thousands of bows, thousands of breaths until thought and movement were no longer separate. That is the essence of Japanese discipline. To merge mind, body, and purpose into one seamless act. In those long hours of silence, I discovered something that books cannot teach. The enemy is never the one before you. The enemy is your reaction to him. If your heart shakes, you are already defeated. If your mind flinches, you have surrendered before drawing your sword. Fudoshin does not mean indifference. It means serenity born from understanding. To be unmoved is not to lack emotion. It is to command it. You feel fear, but it does not lead you. You sense anger, but it does not poison your strike. You acknowledge doubt, but it does not take your balance. When a warrior stands still before the storm, he does not resist the wind, he stands with it. He breathes with it. He becomes the center that chaos cannot reach. That is why calmness is not weakness. It is dominance over one's own mind. Japanese philosophy teaches that true strength is not the sword you wield, but the space between two breaths. That space decides everything, whether you fall into fear or rise above it. To act with clarity, the mind must be still enough to see what is. And in seeing clearly, action becomes pure, precise, inevitable. In war, the body may be bruised, but the unmoving heart remains untouched. Because the man who has found stillness cannot be broken, only transformed. Every defeat becomes lesson. Every victory becomes silence. Fudoshin is not only for battle. It belongs in every moment where life shakes your foundation, when words wound, when loss strikes, when uncertainty surrounds you. If your mind holds steady, you remain free. Not free from pain, but free from panic. Not free from challenge, but free from collapse. To live with an unmoving mind is to see the world as it is transient, unpredictable, but never beyond your composure. You stop trying to control what happens and start controlling how you stand through it. And that, more than any technique or weapon, defines mastery. Every day, I still train, not for perfection, but for presence. Because stillness is not a destination, it is the way, and only through walking that way does a man discover that the mind, like the sword, does not become sharp by chance, but by constant, patient, deliberate effort. That is Fudoshin, the heart that does not move, not because it fears nothing, but because it bows to nothing. The deity within. The symbol of Fudō-myo. When I first heard the name Fudoshin, my master spoke of a god carved in fire and stone. His name was Fudō-myo, the immovable wisdom king. He was fierce, eyes burning, sword in one hand, rope in the other. To most, he looked like a god of wrath. But to those who understood, he was a mirror of discipline. They said Fudō-myo burned away illusion. He cut through ignorance, not with hatred, but with unshakable compassion. His flame was not meant to destroy others, it was meant to purify the self. That is the heart of the warrior's path. Destruction not of the world, but of weakness within. When I looked upon his image, I did not see a deity far away. I saw the ideal of what a man could become: unwavering, centered, fierce in principle, gentle in heart. The old masters taught that every warrior carries Fudō-myo within him, but few have the courage to awaken him. In the temple, when the monks chanted his name, the air would thicken with silence. Each word struck like a hammer shaping the mind. They called this mental forging Tanren, the process of tempering spirit as one tempers steel. You heat the mind through struggle, cool it through breath, and shape it through patience. That is how Fudoshin is born, not through escape, but through confrontation, through the act of meeting your fears, your anger, and your confusion face to face, until they lose the power to move you. This is why the samurai bowed before battle, not to show submission, but to still the storm inside. The sword that Fudō-myo holds is called the kurikara. It is not a weapon of violence. It is the blade of clarity. It cuts away attachment, pride, and hesitation. It teaches that to act with purity, one must first strip away the excess that clouds judgment. For when the mind is cluttered, even the strongest arm strikes in vain. The rope he carries is not for binding others. It is for binding the wandering self, the restless thoughts that pull us away from the present moment. The samurai who cannot control his thoughts will be enslaved by them, but the one who ties them with focus can move freely, unburdened by confusion. The image of Fudō-myo is a reminder that calmness is not passive. It is active resistance against chaos. Stillness is not emptiness. It is force in its most refined form. The man who stands still while the world collapses does not do so because he lacks emotion. He stands still because he has mastered it. In Japanese philosophy, the divine and the human are never separate. The god of immovability is not something to be worshipped, he is something to be realized. To cultivate Fudoshin is to bring the deity down from the temple and place him in the heart. When fear rises, you do not pray to him, you become him. Fudō-myo's fire is not literal flame. It is awareness burning through ignorance. It is the light that exposes the shadowed corners of the mind. Impatience, vanity, hesitation. When you can see them clearly, they lose their hold on you. The fire of wisdom does not burn flesh. It burns illusion. Each scar I bear reminds me of this. Pain is the hammer that forges focus. Discomfort is the forge where resilience is made. The samurai does not seek peace because life is soft. He seeks peace because he knows the world never will be. Fudoshin, the immovable mind, is not something given by gods. It is built through repetition, presence, through acceptance of every blow and every silence. And as the years pass, you realize that strength does not roar. It listens, it waits, it endures. Fudōmyo taught us that stillness and fire are not opposites, they are the same force. The deeper your calm, the sharper your edge. The steadier your breath, the stronger your strike. And when the mind and the heart finally stop moving, you become what you always sought. Not invincible, but unshakable. That is the deity within every warrior. Not a god carved in stone, but a spirit forged in silence. Training the unshakable mind. Fudōshin is not found in silence alone. It is earned through repetition, through discipline, through failure endured without complaint. No warrior is born calm. We become calm by facing what disturbs us until nothing does. Each morning, before the sun cut through the mist, I would kneel on the cold ground. My sword rested beside me, my hands on my thighs, breath steady as the earth. In that stillness I trained not the body but the space between two breaths, because that space, invisible to others, holds the entire battle. The body can be strong, the technique flawless, but if the mind trembles, defeat is already near. That is why the true dojo is not made of walls and tatami. It is the mind itself. Every thought, every impulse, every distraction, they are the opponents you must overcome before facing any real one. At first, stillness feels impossible. The mind runs, memories scream, doubts multiply, but with each breath, they fade, like ripples vanishing across a pond. This is the first lesson of Fudoshin control. Begins with awareness. You cannot command what you do not see. Training the unmoving mind means training the senses to serve clarity. When your awareness sharpens, noise becomes rhythm, chaos becomes pattern. Even in battle, every motion, every breath, every heartbeat can be felt without panic. You begin to see what others miss: the small tremor before a strike, the hesitation before deceit. That is how presence becomes protection. But mental discipline is not built by comfort. It is carved through resistance. Each repetition of kata, each hour of meditation, each moment of discomfort, it is all a blade sharpening itself against the grain of the world. Patience is the whetstone. Consistency is the forge. Fudoshin grows not from victory, but from endurance. When your legs shake, when your breath shortens, when your will begins to fade, that is when you meet the edge of your spirit. Push beyond that moment, and you step into stillness. Because beyond exhaustion lies surrender, and beyond surrender lies peace. There were days when my teacher said nothing, only watched. I would strike, breathe, strike again. He knew that words cannot teach what the body must remember. Discipline is not a lesson, it is a scar. It is the proof that you have met your limits and refuse to stop there. Over time, I began to see that true strength is rhythm, not reaction. When the mind moves with intention, there is no wasted motion. When the spirit is steady, even the smallest gesture carries power. A hand raised slowly can silence a crowd. A single step can change the outcome of a fight. That is the quiet authority of a trained mind. The samurai does not chase calmness, he creates it. He builds it through ritual, through tea poured carefully, through the cleaning of his blade, through the bow before practice. Every small act is meditation disguised as duty. Through them, The mind learns to move without chaos. Modern men seek peace by escaping the noise. The warrior finds peace by walking through it unmoved, because silence outside means nothing if there is no silence within. And silence within cannot exist without daily discipline. That is why I train, not to fight others, but to remain whole when the world fractures. Because when the storm comes, and it always does, skill will fade, speed will slow, youth will pass. But the mind trained in stillness does not break. It bends, it breathes, it waits, and then it strikes with purpose. Training the unshakable mind is not about mastering technique. It is about mastering being. To stand, breathe, and act without the weight of confusion that is true mastery. It is the difference between a man who survives the world and a man who shapes it. Fudoshin is not won in a single battle. It is built in every repetition, every breath, every moment where quitting would be easier but you continue anyway. Each of those moments is a hammer strike upon the soul, and through those strikes, the warrior becomes something that the world can push but never move. That is the art of training the unshakable mind. It does not begin with perfection. It begins with stillness and the choice to return to it every single day. Emotion without reaction. There was a time when I believed strength meant silence, that emotion was weakness and calmness was a mask. But I was wrong. True stillness is not the absence of emotion. It is the understanding of it. Fudoshin does not tell us to feel nothing. It tells us to feel completely without being moved by what we feel. The samurai's heart is not cold. It burns quietly, controlled, directed, like the flame of a candle in still air. Unseen wind may pass, yet the light does not flicker. In battle I have felt fear many times. The taste of metal in my mouth, the rush of blood in my ears, these are not signs of weakness. They are reminders that I am alive. But to let them command me would be to die before the first strike. So I learned to see fear as a wave, one that rises, crests, and falls. If you do not resist it, it cannot drown you. Anger, too, I have known well. The mind, when insulted, seeks to defend itself. But anger is a blade with no hilt. When you grip it, you bleed first. So the warrior does not suppress anger, he studies it. He breathes through it until its energy becomes focus. That is how emotion transforms from fire into fuel. Every emotion is a message. Fear warns you of danger. Anger tells you where your pride still lives. Sadness reminds you of what you love. To master emotion is to listen deeply, but to answer slowly. That is the practice of emotional discipline. When my teacher struck me during training, not with the sword but with his words, I once reacted. My body stiffened. My mind closed. He smiled and said, "You block your sword with emotion. That is why it feels heavy." I did not understand then, but over the years I saw that emotion, when unmastered, clouds intention. It turns precision into reaction, presence into impulse. In Zen, they speak of Mushin, no mind, but it does not mean emptiness. It means the mind so clear that emotion can pass through it like wind through bamboo. No resistance, no clinging, no judgment. The emotion moves. The warrior remains. The discipline of Fudoshin is not to kill feeling, but to refine it. To feel fear, yet act with courage. To feel sorrow, yet remain centered. To feel love, yet never lose balance. That is strength, not a hardened heart, but one that flows without breaking. Many people confuse calmness with coldness. They believe detachment means distance, but calmness is intimacy with reality. When the mind is still, you see clearly both the beauty and the brutality of life. And in that clarity, emotion becomes wisdom. I remember once standing before a river swollen with rain. The water raged, crashing against the rocks, and yet beneath it all was a silent current, steady, unseen, constant. That is the mind of a warrior. The surface moves. The depths remain still. The world will test you endlessly through words, through loss, through uncertainty. If you let every ripple move you, you will spend your life reacting. But if you stand still within, every wave becomes rhythm. Every challenge becomes training. When the body learns to breathe and the mind learns to see without judgment, emotion becomes movement, not control. It ceases to be your master and becomes your ally. That is the transformation that separates the ordinary from the disciplined. The sword does not cut because of rage. It cuts because of precision, and precision cannot exist in a heart consumed by noise. So the warrior trains not to erase emotion, but to guide it, to make it serve clarity, not chaos. In this way, Fudoshin is not a shield against life's storms. It is the eye within them, a space untouched by noise, fear, or reaction. In that space, the warrior finds the rarest kind of freedom, not freedom from emotion, but freedom within it. And when that moment comes, when fear rises and anger tempts, you do not need to suppress them. You simply breathe, and they bow before your stillness, because in that stillness, they see their master. From Fudoshin to Mushin. Acting without thought. When the mind becomes still, a new state begins to awaken Mushin, the no mind. It is the next step beyond Fudoshin, where Fudoshin is the still lake. Mushin is the river that flows through it, calm, but in motion. I first glimpsed this state in the middle of combat. The clash of blades, the thunder of feet, the cry of men around me, all of it vanished. There was no thought, no effort, no choice. My body moved, but it did not feel like mine. The strike came before intention, the defense before fear. Everything was happening through me, not by me. Afterward, I understood this is the true purpose of training, not to think faster, but to think less, not to predict, but to be present. For in the absence of thought, truth appears. Mushin is not emptiness in the way many believe. It is not a blank mind. It is awareness without friction, perception without noise. The warrior does not disappear. He becomes completely awake, and in that awareness, every movement is precise, effortless, and pure. To reach Mushin, one must first master Fudoshin. You cannot flow until you have become still. The river cannot run deep unless its source is calm. This is why the old masters trained endlessly in repetition. They were not memorizing technique. They were dissolving the need to remember. When movement no longer comes from thought, it comes from truth. The body becomes the sword, and the sword becomes the mind. There is no separation. Every cut, every breath, every pause carries the same energy. And in that unity, fear cannot exist because there is no one left to be afraid. In Mushin, there is no hesitation. The strike is not forced, it happens. The step is not planned, it unfolds. You do not control life, you move with it. That is the final lesson of all martial arts. Harmony with what is. I remember my teacher once placing a single leaf in my hand. He said, "Hold it too tight, and you crush it. Hold it too loose, and it falls away. Find the balance that is Mushin." It took me decades to understand. Mushin is the balance between control and surrender. It is effort without tension, mastery without ego. When the mind stops insisting, perfection reveals itself. Every sound becomes rhythm. Every moment becomes opportunity. Even danger becomes dance. That is why the greatest warrior is not the one who resists, but the one who flows. This is the paradox of Mushin. When you stop trying to win, you move in a way that cannot lose, because your actions are not slowed by thought or fear. They arise from clarity, like the moon reflecting on water, bright, silent, and untouchable. In the heat of battle, when others hesitate, the one in Mushin moves as if guided by something beyond himself. He is not faster, only freer. His movements are not reactive, but inevitable. He no longer fights against the world, he becomes part of its rhythm. But Mushin is not limited to combat. It lives in the way you speak, listen, create, and move through life. When your actions arise from presence rather than noise, you stop wasting energy on resistance. Every step, every choice, every word becomes aligned with purpose. That is what the samurai meant when they spoke of living with flow. The modern world worships speed, but speed without stillness is chaos. The warrior's mind moves fast only because it is quiet. It reacts instantly only because it is free from hesitation. Mushin is not about reaction, it is about absence of resistance. When you live with no mind, you no longer seek to control the moment. You become one with it. And in that union, you discover the highest form of mastery, not victory over others, but peace within yourself. Even now, when I practice alone beneath the fading sun, I no longer think of strikes or forms. The body moves, the breath flows, the silence deepens, the sword cuts the air, and in that sound, there is no division between who moves and what moves. There is only awareness. That is the path from Fudoshin to Mushin. Stillness teaches you control. Flow teaches you freedom. And together, they forge the warrior who no longer fights against life, because he has become part of its movement. Unmoved in a world that never stops moving. The world has changed. The clang of swords has faded, but the battles remain inside every man. Now the enemies wear different faces: distraction, doubt, and endless noise. The war no longer takes place on a field of dirt, but in the mind. Everywhere I look, people move faster but see less. They speak more but say nothing. They chase peace while running from stillness. But a warrior knows peace is not found in the absence of motion. It is found in the ability to stay unmoved while everything around you shifts. In the time of my youth, I thought strength was movement to strike, to act, to dominate. But life revealed another truth. The hardest thing a man can do is to stay still, to hold his ground when the world tries to push him into fear, anger, or haste. That is the test of Fudoshin in every age. Stillness does not mean retreat. It means control. It is the fire inside that burns steady no matter how fierce the wind. To live with an unmoving mind is not to withdraw from life. It is to walk through it with balance, grace, and power. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel the pulse of the world, fast, anxious, hungry. Men wake with noise and sleep with noise, filling every silence with distraction. They forget that silence is the sound of clarity. In silence, the samurai meets himself. In silence, the mind sharpens, and the heart remembers what matters. When I walk through the market, I see faces lost in thought, hearts pulled by 1,000 invisible strings. Each desire, each worry, each regret, another blade aimed at their own peace. But the man of discipline carries his stillness like armor. He does not react to every touch of chaos. He observes, chooses, and moves when the moment is right. That is what it means to be unmoved. Not to resist life, but to move only when purpose calls. To live like a mountain among waves present, immovable, untouched by the storm's impatience. Fudoshin is not an escape from emotion or pain. It is mastery over reaction. You feel deeply, but you act deliberately. And in doing so, you rise above the current of the world that pulls most men under. The greatest warriors were never those who killed the most. They were those who conquered themselves. They trained until discipline became instinct, until calmness became strength, because they knew that the man who cannot hold his own center will always be ruled by someone else's. When the world shouts for urgency, the warrior answers with patience. When others panic, he breathes. When the crowd follows, he stands alone, not in arrogance, but in understanding. He knows that the world moves in circles, but stillness always stays at the center. Every morning, I still bow to the sword before touching it. It is no longer a weapon for battle, but a reminder of truth. The sword represents choice: when to act, when to wait, when to speak, when to stay silent. In mastering those choices, the warrior becomes untouchable. The young seek movement, the wise seek stillness. But true mastery is to know that both are the same. Movement is meaningless without stillness, and stillness has no purpose without movement. That balance is the heart of all martial arts and the essence of life itself. One day, all motion will stop. The body will rest, the breath will fade, the sword will fall silent. But if you have lived with clarity, courage, and Fudoshin, nothing will be lost. Because what is unmoved within you cannot die. It will remain calm, eternal, like the still flame that no wind can extinguish. So remember this: when the world pushes and pulls at you, you are not what moves. You are what remains. And in that truth, the warrior finds his final victory, not in the fight, but in the stillness that follows it. The battle never ends. It only changes shape. Once, we faced blades and blood. Now, the enemies are within distraction, doubt, fear, but the way remains the same. Fudoshin, the unmoving mind, is not for monks or soldiers alone. It is for every man who refuses to kneel before chaos, for every mind that chooses clarity over noise, for every heart that seeks stillness in a restless world. When the storm rises, most men react. The warrior breathes. When the crowd shouts, he listens. When the world demands speed, he moves in silence. That is his edge, his peace, his discipline. Remember, this calm is not weakness. It is control. If you still believe in strength built from silence, if you still value mastery over reaction, then you are already one of us. Subscribe to the samurai method. No noise, no chaos, just stillness, structure, and the art of unshakable presence. The body moves, the world moves, the mind remains.